All right, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. We'll start out where everyone else does. As far as earliest childhood memory, what are we getting into?
Well, thanks for having me on the program. Where would you like me to start as far as earliest childhood memory, just in general?
Yeah, yeah, just in general.
Oh boy, I think about 3 years old or 4 years old, camping with my father and
Okay.
and him picking up a Twinkies, the snack, this was a great treat when I was a kid. Here, have this Twinkie, and I was
Yeah.
like, blah, and I didn't want to eat it. And you're a spoiled brat and got really angry with me. So it's always a great story to tell.
Well,
Earliest memory.
absolutely. And everybody always says how great the Twinkie is, and I feel like I had been had because my mom, we always ate relatively healthy. I went to a buddy's house and had a Twinkie, same exact thing. I was like, this filling stuff is not like, what are we doing here?
Well, I don't think you're gonna be getting any advertisement from Twinkie on this episode. So
That's all right. We're okay with that. As far as like camping with your dad and stuff, was he an outdoorsman? Did you guys go camping a lot? What'd you have going on there?
yeah, usually every year we'd go camping at least once, sometimes with the family. So that's just my dad and I would go for it's either Memorial Day or Labor Day. And then the family would go sometimes as well during the summer. So it was those are good memories.
Yeah, no, I love that. I recall going with my family, and I am now realizing that my parents had to put in a lot of work for it to seem that fun. Like I just remember going playing in the woods, going to the sand dunes, and I went with my two kids a couple months ago, and I was like, I just want to test this out to make sure we can do it. It was a lot of work, but it's like, all right, we can go camping.
Right. Yeah, as a kids, it's just fun, but when you're an adult, it's putting in work.
I tried putting up the tent without the instructions. I was like, there's a couple poles here. And like an hour and a half later, I had to admit to my wife that I didn't know what I was doing. And I was like, oh, okay, I need some help. So other than camping and stuff like that, did you do a lot of family trips? Were you around a lot of family?
Yeah, my dad's family had 14 kids, so
Ooh.
there was a big family gatherings and stuff like every Sunday after church, people would get together
Yeah.
and when my grandparents were alive and stuff. And we did a little bit of traveling as kids, different places and stuff. I'd went to see family over in Germany
Okay.
and we had a number of different really wonderful trips as
Mhm.
kids. We went down to Texas one time and
Okay.
Florida, I think, another time. And yeah,
As far as your experience in Germany, how would you classify that? It was a good time just seeing family. What was the vibe there?
it was good. The first time I went, I was about fourth grade. I went with my mom and we visited family over there and got to see some like old ancient castles and things
Okay.
like that. And then I went again at 15. I went on my own to stay with family over there for a summer. So that was a lot of fun. When
Okay.
you're in fourth grade, you don't remember all of, you don't appreciate, I think, as much as you do as when you're an adult. But I do remember a lot of good times. Both
Yeah.
both were a lot of good times.
Yeah. For a long time, I was very fortunate to go on a bunch of vacations, and we would always end up in like a museum, and I'd be like, what are we doing here? It's like pictures on walls. I was like, I didn't really like art class, but I'd like doing art, but I was just trying to run through the museums. But nowadays, I'm like, okay, like I could see a little bit of here. I could see staying in here for a couple minutes.
Right.
So around, we'll say middle school, high school time, were you big into sports, mostly hanging out with friends? Did you like academics?
Music was always my passion. So I
Okay.
like in school I lettered in choir, which you don't hear about that too much, but I lettered in choir. I did some sports and I did when I was younger, I did like wrestling, did
Okay.
football for a season or two. Um, yeah, wrestling and football I think was about it. I did, taekwondo, karate
Okay.
and yeah.
What
Oh,
was
and baseball in the summertime as well. I forgot about that.
okay, what was your family's expectation either around sports or schools, and then how'd they convey those expectations?
They were pretty adamant about, at least about getting into sports and things like that. So I mean, I enjoyed wrestling when I started that in like elementary school and was
Okay.
going to the tournaments and all that. And by the time I hit like junior high, or I forget what year it was maybe seventh or eighth grade, but somewhere around there before ninth grade. By ninth grade, I was like, I don't really enjoy this anymore. I don't want to be doing this anymore. And they got like you need to pick a sport.
Yeah.
Well, in the rural Minnesota where I grew up, you didn't have a lot of choices.
Right.
Like the basketball team was so few guys that there was nobody on the bench. So they were like, "Oh, we're not gonna might not be able to have a basketball team this year." That's how
Yeah.
few students were in the school. So, and so people were always like, oh, "You want to try out for basketball?" And I was like, "I'm not really interested in basketball," but I didn't. I felt like I was being forced into wrestling towards the end, but eventually, my parents gave in, and they're like, "Well, if you don't want to, we're not going to force you to be in sports because it is what it is." But
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up, I had a good family, good life in that sense, and yeah, I was a little misbehaving in a little bit later years, but generally very good upbringing.
As far as like rural Minnesota, I we have some family members up there. My wife's brother there. I think it's around White Bear Lake, or like how where do you know, and like where were you compared to that?
Well, White Bear Lake is like what you'd consider a suburb of St. Paul, kind of.
Okay.
I mean, it's a little out there, but it's I would consider it a suburb, I guess. And I was in southwestern Minnesota, so about 2.5 hours, almost
Okay.
3 hours out, kind of down by like a little town called Clarkfield. So it was near about 20 something miles from Marshall, Minnesota.
Okay. Okay.
That's that's the biggest town that's nearby. It's not that big, so
Yeah. So how did you get the bug for music? Was it listening to someone in your family, something on the radio? How did we get there?
just as long as young as I can remember, I would always listen to the radio. I would dub cassette tapes back in the day.
Okay.
My dad's family was very musically inclined. They did like him and his brothers had done barbershop quartets and
Oh, cool.
different things like that. They were very musical kind of family. So
Yeah.
maybe I got it from there. I don't know, but it was just always. It still is a very big part of my life. But music is it's always been very important to me.
Yeah. In high school, I remember freshman year going to a guidance counselor, and they're like, "All right, how do you want your high school to look like when you graduate? You can go into this kind of thing." And I'm 15 years old. I appreciate the guidance, but I'm just here to play sports. I'm not really interested in anything else. What was it like for you going through high school and trying to figure out what life was about?
Hmm. Well, I was pretty good student. I mean, I was a good student up until about that trip when I was 15 and I went to Germany. And
Okay.
when I went to Germany, I was told, because I had a couple choices because we got family over there, and they said you could stay with your one uncle that I'd met when I was younger. And he's
Yeah.
like a party guy, womenizing, beer drinking, and everybody in the family thought for sure I'm going there because I already know him too,
Yeah.
and that sounded like my line of where I would want to go. Or I could go stay with my other uncle who had fought in World War II. He was injured in the war, and I could go stay with him, but I'd never met him before. I didn't even know
Yeah.
what he looked like. So I said, no, I want to go stay with him.
Yeah.
And they're like, the family's trying to discourage me. They're like, he's an old school German. He's going to be very strict. You're not going to like it there. If you think there's rules here at home, cool, you're going to be in for it when you get there. And I
Yeah.
was like, no, 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 because I was always interested in history. So
Okay.
my thinking was, I want to talk to him. I want to hear those war stories. I want to, find out about this stuff. Even though he didn't speak a word of English, but I spoke some German because we
Okay.
heard it growing up, and my mom and my grandparents from over there. So I spoke some, but I wouldn't say I was fluent
Yeah.
by any means. And so that was the choice that I made to go over there and see him. And what I found out was over there, I didn't have all the rules like I had at home. Basically, the only time I got in trouble was when I left the house and went for a walk and didn't tell nobody because they thought
Okay.
I disappeared or something. So that was the only time I got disciplined or in any trouble over there. Was you don't leave the house without saying something. But otherwise, if you said, well, I'm going to go to this town, I'll be back tomorrow, it was fine. And that was much less strict than I was used to. So when
Yeah.
I get home, now I'm wanting that same freedom. So
Got
my parents are like, you got to be home. You can't stay out all night with this girlfriend or whatever. And yes, I can. And I didn't, I wasn't coming home. So I ended up getting kicked out of the house by 16.
Okay.
16, yeah, 16. I was driving at 15 because I had a farm work permit. So I was already driving. So I would just leave and not come home. So that didn't go over so well. So I was
Mhm.
out on my own at 16. But in school, and I did finish school. I ended up going back to school and all that. I went into alternative.
To rewind a little bit, when you were
Yeah, yeah.
talking to your uncle, how did your either world perspective get questioned or changed? Like what was going on there?
Well, when I got over there, my cousin had told me, my thinking is I'm going to ask all these questions about the war, and she's like, "Do not bring that up. Do
Really?
not
Okay.
talk to him about it. It's a sore subject in his house, And he was wounded really badly. Like if you ever see the in the old documentaries, like when they had the German soldiers that have like their faces that are burned off,
Yeah.
like that he was one that happened to him.
Wow.
He was blown up in a tank by the Allies. So um he was disfigured. So when I said, well, how am I going to find my uncle at the airport, that was it, look for the person
Okay.
that with the burns, and so that's how I found him at the airport and everything. So I actually wasn't able to talk to him about that, my fascination with history, because I was told not to.
Okay. So as far as there was no like positive, negative about either like the US or the Germans or just no conversation on that.
Not too much, not too much. Basically it was, don't bring up those subjects,
Okay.
and I was in America, we're out of the school in the summertime, but they're only out for like a month, at least where my cousin was going to school. So
Okay.
she was still going to school at the time when I was there, so I was going along with her to school, and that was pretty interesting there because it seemed like a lot more difficult than the schools over here.
Very what made it more difficult?
Just a higher level of studying
Okay.
and more, like there was kids asking me, because I went on a class trip with them, and there's kids
Yeah.
asking me, well, tell me the 22nd president of the United States, and I'm like, I don't know that, and plus it's a numbers question, like and they're like, you don't know all the US presidents, and I was like, no, I couldn't. And so some of them are like rattling it off in order, and they're going, I'm German and I know the US presidents, and I
Yeah.
know, it's like, woof, these
I
kids are smart.
I have found that a lot in when I either go to other countries or talk to friends from other countries that they have their US knowledge down. Like I am just thoroughly impressed. I'm like, that is we go through it in class, we kind of talk about it, and then we just move on. It's not there's I wouldn't say there's a lot of pride when it comes to like knowing a lot about your country. Like yes, there's US pride and stuff like that, but as far as like knowing things in our studies, not so much. So you come back home, you're like, "Hey, I really enjoyed that type of lifestyle. I would like to continue this." What was it like getting kicked out? Was it a tough experience? Or you're like, "I'm ready for this."
It was, I mean, it was challenging. It was tough, but I mean, I kind of feel like, and I didn't blame my parents for it. They were like, I mean, they went through a lot with me because when I got back, like my dad sold his motorcycle because they were worried. I didn't really understand this at the time, or they tell me later, what, your dad sold his motorcycle because we were worried you would take it in the middle of the night and go off. And I'm thinking, well,
Wow.
I'd never done nothing like that before.
Yeah.
The car was mine. I started working at 12 years old, and I saved up for the car. So I felt like I could take that, but I wasn't going to take something of my dad's. But they didn't know that, so they
Interesting.
just
Okay.
so it was pretty tough. So then I ended up with like a girlfriend's brother who was on his own, and then she followed after she finished high school and all that. But yeah, it was challenging, but I felt like I was ready for it. I wanted, I was one of those kids that wanted to be growing up too quick,
Yeah,
like didn't want to be a kid anymore. I don't need these rules. I thought I knew better than everybody, but it messed a lot of things up because I was doing so well in school that I had I don't know what you call it anymore, but it was like kind of like a scholarship where you could go your senior year to college for
yeah.
free because your grades were good enough to do that. So that was all set up. Like that
Mhm.
was ready to go, and I was going to go for radio. I wanted to go into music, but I decided on radio disc jockey.
Okay,
But I started skipping so much school that the way the system was set up in Minnesota, maybe still is, but back then it was so many absences, they start knocking your grades down. So
okay.
even though my grades were all A's and B's, now they're knocked down to like D's and F's because I was skipping so much school just to go driving around or running around with friends or girlfriends or whatever. So
So
that was
what's going
downfall.
through the mind as you know this is happening? You're like, ah, like I'll kind of go to class, but it kind of snowballs. Like, how were you talking to yourself about the situation?
I think it was just like this. I didn't like the authority of it, and the fact that I kept saying like, and because everybody's trying to figure it out, like, well, why are you doing this? You're screwing your life up, and at that time, you think you know better, or you don't
Right.
care, or whatever. And school just wasn't challenging. I'm like, we're learning the same thing every year. Like this is the same crap we did in the history book in seventh grade. Now in 10th or 11th grade, and it was just it wasn't challenging. It was boring, and the school went. I mean, I have to say this too. The school went out of their way to accommodate me because I was like, well, I don't want to show up here early in the morning. Never been still not a morning person, but when you got to work, you got to work,
Yeah.
but that's different. But I was just like, I don't want to go to school at 8 o'clock in the morning. So knowing uh, the uh, that I wanted to go into music and all that, they actually set up at the school like a radio show that I could do after school as a way to
Wow.
continue those credits. I mean, they went out of the principal was awesome. They went out of their way for me. So I'm running a radio show after school. I'm playing CDs and all this kind of stuff and getting credit for this. So I don't have to be there early in the morning.
Yeah.
And I remember they'd gotten me, one teacher had gotten me this alarm clock that, because they're like, he's not getting up in the morning. And that was part of it. And the alarm clock was shaped like three sticks of dynamite, and it
Okay.
had like five or six different sounds of machine guns, bombs blowing, all this different stuff. This will get him up. So that was helpful, but at the same time, I still wasn't going every day.
Yeah.
And then I threw it all away. I just stopped going to school. So then I had end up going into alternative school where you kind of work on your own pace
Yeah.
and ended up graduating before the rest of I got kicked out of school and then end up graduating about a month or two before the rest of the class because I could work at my own pace and just buzz through it.
Yeah, that's incredible that you were like, no, this particular school system isn't working out for me, but I'm still gonna do it. How were you able to just push yourself being your own teacher, being your own boss at that point?
Well, you still showed up at the alternative school. The one that I went to was I had moved by this time. When I was kicked out, I had moved to a little town with my girlfriend's brother and wasn't going to school, and just working and stuff. And eventually that ran its course. And then I moved to St. Cloud, Minnesota, which was
Okay.
a bigger town, and that's where I finished the school. I enrolled back in school that year, and then or that following year, and you would show up to class or you'd show up at the school, get your assignments and things like that, and you had teachers there, but you could kind of go at your own pace. So
Okay.
I just remember seeing like maybe two or three teachers there, and just buzzing through it. So that was better for me because I
Hmm.
could you could kind of go at your own pace, and it was easy.
Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of homeschool people on here, more like more so self-starters, and they're dangerous. Anything anything they want to do, they're gonna do it, just like yourself. It's like this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do it, and like it doesn't seem like there's any doubt. This is just here we go.
Yeah, for some people it just works that way. I don't know. I don't want to say there's anything wrong with the system, but I guess it wasn't working for me, and then I end up blowing a bunch of opportunities. So I do regret that. So I always tell the kids nowadays, like the choices that you make as young people can affect you as an adult as well,
Mhm.
especially if you go down a bad path.
Yeah. So as far as that path, where do you feel like that started for you in your journey?
The bad path?
Yeah.
Well, I got into National Socialism or neo-Nazism, Nazism, and I was attracted to that from a young age,
Okay.
from fourth grade, just knowing the family. My grandfather fought in Hitler's army during the war. Both of my great uncles did on my mom's side. And the family was from Prussia, so I knew that history because my grandma would talk about the war if I asked her. But
Okay.
typically, as I got older, my grandfather would talk little bits and pieces, but I always wanted to ask him about war stories. But I say this, with a caveat that the family didn't encourage my interest in Nazism or anything like that. That was my own doing. But it started with that family connection and that history and
Hmm.
just wanting to know about it. And I was always told, don't ask your grandpa questions about that. He doesn't like to talk about it. It was a bad time for us. And
Yeah.
the family lost my mom's family lost their home and everything in Prussia because that was given over to Poland after the war. So they lost their land and homes and everything. And all the Germans, most all the Germans in Prussia were relocated. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, so that bothered me. But yeah, it was that family history. So that set me kind of down that path. So by the time I'm in St. Cloud at 16, I'm trying to search out the movement. Where do you join it? This is
Yeah.
before the time where the internet was real prolific. So I'm searching, trying to find groups and things like that. But by the time I'm 17, 18, right around that age, then I'd come into contact with the movement and got active pretty quickly, rose up through the ranks, and that the rest of my story goes from there.
So as far as your thoughts on the world at that time, not necessarily eugenics or racism or just like culturally, like on just how things work. Because I feel like when I grew up, we had family dinners on Wednesdays and Sundays, and I thought everybody else's family was like that, and everybody else went on two vacations, and like my parents got divorced, but they were still cordial. So when I grew up, I was like 18 or 19 and I started dating other people and seeing like lifestyles were different. Like I grew up definitely upper middle class and my friends all had big houses, nice cars. So culturally I didn't really understand anything. And my opinions were more of just like rainbows and butterflies. Like, hey, everything's going pretty well. Like for you, was it a positive look on the world, negative? Like how were you looking at things at that point?
I think it was a kind of a negative outlook on the world, so getting involved in any kind of extremism, whether it's neo-Nazism, whether it's, far left like Antifa type stuff,
Yeah,
whether it's religious extremism like jihadi, radical Islam, or any kind of, radicalism or extremism, you don't see the world through a very colorful or nice lens.
right.
You feel like you're under attack. You feel like in my case, my people were under attack.
Okay.
Um, it's a very negative outlook on the world, unfortunately.
And then as far as like having that discussion, do you have other people in your life where you can like bounce these ideas off people? Because I would have, or I still do, I have friends that are in the military, and then when I come to them with a discussion, there's like, like you're looking at this from a rainbows and butterflies perspective. I'm like, absolutely. Like that's why I need to bounce ideas off other people. So did you ever have those discussions growing up where there was back and forth, like, hey, maybe yes, maybe no?
I don't Not too much when as a kid, there wasn't like I said, I wasn't propagandized at that point. It was
Okay.
more of that interest in that historical aspect. But then I thought to myself, well, I'm gonna get this is cool. This is how, as a
Yeah.
teenager, this is cool. I want to get involved in this. I want to be a you know I looked up to my grandfather. He
Right.
was a tough guy. That it was just like, so this must be this is what tough men do. Like, I mean, that's not the exact way I would best way to articulate it, but it was a manly thing to do, I guess you could say, is the way I
Gotcha.
looked at it. Now, I'm not saying it is. It's not something I would encourage anybody to go into. So I want to say that with a caveat, but that's how I saw it. It was something that I sought out and wanted to be part of.
Mhm.
And then when you join, which I did by 18,
Yeah.
now you're being propagandized. And before that, even at 16, I'm reading Mein Kampf. I went
Okay.
to the bookstore and got that. I'm reading all kinds of propaganda, and then I'm writing to all these different groups. Starting to be propagandized through the materials that I'm ordering or that I'm writing through the mail. Now I'm becoming Holocaust denier, and then I was getting radicalized into the movement. And then when I joined, then I was basically taught to hate, and then I became went from being propagandized to being the propagandizer.
So on the daily, did you just wake up with a, hey, I'm frustrated, like where I am in life, or like where did the, not necessarily the pain, but where did the frustration come from?
Well, music was still my driving force,
Okay.
like that was so politics and National Socialism, all this, Nazism, this stuff was like the side piece, like it was an interest of mine,
Okay.
but it wasn't the driving force, it
Yeah.
was the driving force was music. And
Gotcha.
so in St. Cloud, I tried out for some bands, and I'd found one band, and I was like, these guys were kind of content with just playing like wedding parties and stuff like that. And I'm like, no, I want to go to Hollywood, like I'm going to be a big rock star. That's my thing,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, that's cool and everything, but like, this is our side hustle, like we're okay with just doing this. And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
oh, I got to get out of here. This isn't right for me. This doesn't work. So I start trying out for bands in the Twin Cities,
Okay.
and I got brought on to a hair band. This, believe it or not, it was in a hair
Hey,
metal.
I'm
Like,
with
we're
you.
talking
I'm with you.
yeah. So that's the music I wanted to do, and I was doing that. So I relocated to Twin Cities after getting brought on with this band, and they taught me, how to have a stage presence, and we were playing all the major clubs in the Twin Cities. It was awesome. It was
Mhm.
like the best time of my life, and but I'm still, you know, writing to these movement groups,
Okay.
and still have that side interest. So I get involved with the National Socialist movement, and join that. I'm active. I'm doing things, but I'm putting my hair up in a hat, like when I'm doing movement stuff.
Okay.
And wearing, like, I went on a Montel Williams, I think it was Montel Williams. Well, I've been on a bunch of talk shows. I think yeah, it was Montel. And so I went on there with a hat and sunglasses, to keep disguised. And I
Yeah.
was using a fake name. I was going by Jeff Stevens, to separate the music, and, to try to also keep my family safe, because our
Yeah.
name wasn't that common. And I didn't want any of my activism or anything to blow back on them. And at one point, we were invited to, because we were all over in the news, doing marches through South St. Paul and things like that. And we got invited on this really popular, like, conservative talk show that was in the area, because everybody's trying to figure out, why are neo-Nazis marching on the streets and stuff.
Yeah.
And we went on this, myself and the guy that was running the organization at the time, had went on this talk show, and I'm spewing anti-Semitic drivel, saying hateful things on the air. And the talk show host, says, she's getting really angry, and she says, "Your name is not Jeff Stevens, it is Jeff Schoep." And she spells my name out on, it's SCH. She's spelling it out on the air, and I don't know how I have an idea how she found it out, but it,
Yeah.
I don't know for sure. So to this day, I don't know for sure how she found out, but she doxed me before doxing was even a term,
Wow.
and not just dox me, but dox my family, basically. So
Mhm.
she says on the air, she says, "Your mother's an attorney. She lives in this little town. named the town. Your father runs a manufacturing company. He works here, and
Yeah.
named where he was at. And she goes, and in fact, in the next commercial break, I'm going to call your mother and find out how she raised somebody, raised a young man that thinks and believes this way. Dude, my whole life felt like it was crumbling at that point. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I'm saying to her on the air and off the air, because it's like constant commercials. And I'm saying to her on and off the air, please don't call my mother. Don't, this could put her, my family, in severe danger. They don't have nothing to do with what I believe in. In fact, they're against it.
Yeah.
They don't approve of it. And you could put them in harm's way. And she was like, no, I'm gonna call. And now at this point, callers to her program are calling in going, you shouldn't do this. Like that could put his family in danger. And now I'm lying too, because I'm thinking like I'm like 19 at this time, and I'm thinking, how can I protect my family? Even though I was brought up not to lie, and I despise lying and I despise liars, I'm lying because I'm trying to protect my family. So I'm saying, you, I'm trying to. She's not listening to me. It's, that my parents aren't about this. So what am I going to say?
Yeah.
So I'm like, my parents hate me. That was the lie.
Yeah.
My parents hate me. They've ostracized me. They have nothing to do with me. And that wasn't true. They didn't hate me. They didn't like what I was involved in, but they didn't hate me.
Yeah.
So I'm lying about that on the air to try to protect them, which then made me feel like total trash, like
Yeah.
a dirt bag, because I was brought up not to lie, and here I am lying, and I'm like doubling down on the lie, like, no, they hate me. They have nothing to do with me. Please don't call them. And yeah, so that went forward, and that caused a lot of problems in my family's life. In fact, it wrecked my mother's career.
So many different questions, but as far as your thought about your path, do you ever think like, oh, maybe this isn't the correct run, or everybody else is wrong? Like, what's going through your head as far as those choices?
Well, after being doxxed, like I said, no, so my mom was an attorney. She had run for public office to be a judge. That was her dream.
Yeah.
She was elected to be a judge, and the way she explained this was in Minnesota, you had to have a judges, or the governor signed off on all the new judges. It's like a formality. And she got a call from the governor, and the governor said, Mrs. Schoep, your son's a leader in the Nazi party. Your father fought in the German army. I don't feel you're fit to be a judge in the state. So now my mother was not able to take her seat on the bench, even though she was, moderately liberal, and the way I view, so when that happened, I thought, wow, I just now this activism destroyed my mother's career. The band is next. They'll never have a chance of going to Hollywood or becoming big rock stars. The singer is a known neo-Nazi.
Yeah.
So I shaved my head, I quit the band, and instead of a lot of times when people think, okay, so this pressure is being put on this young man, like maybe this will make you rethink, the path that you're on. And I could tell you, and what all that did, and I don't blame, for a long time I blamed everybody else. These are my poor choices, so I mean I have to take responsibility for that. I can't say, well, I mean, yes, the cause and effect definitely happened. And had she taken a different approach and not doxed me, like at that age, I think there still could have been a good chance for change. But the way I viewed it was, now my family's under attack for something that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I just doubled down. And that was a history that continued through my entire involvement in the movement until just about the very end, when there was more reasons to double down. And finally, I stopped doing that in 2019. But it brought on a whole history of doubling down. So I felt like, now the government's after my family,
Right.
so I'm going to go to war with the government. All these people are doing these terrible things, so it's because I'm right, and because I'm so right that they fear me, they fear what I'm doing. now they're attacking my innocent family members. So
Yeah.
guess what? Everything you thought I was doing, I'm going to do it 10 times more, and I'm going to be even more successful at it. So I took a small organization, and within a couple of years, I was appointed to run it and built it up to the largest of its kind in the entire country.
Yeah, it's a wild take to like adults in either in power or just in general, they will just say, "Oh, I'm gonna give them an ultimatum and like they did something wrong, so I'm either gonna fix it or maybe they're just doing it for views." But if you talk to somebody, maybe like a therapist or a psychologist, and you run that plan by them, they're gonna tell you they're gonna just dig in deeper. Like there's no olive branch, there's no this, and it seems as if most of those shows they're mostly just going for views. They're going for clips. Probably not clips back then, but it didn't seem like they were looking for a healthy conversation.
No, unfortunately not. And the reason we agreed to it, and I would agree to go on any kind of shows like that, with the exception of Jerry Springer. So
Okay.
there was some there was like a little bit of discernment in there, but that was like the only one.
We had
I would
lines
go on
that we
just
would
about
not
everything.
cross.
Yes, yes. But yeah, so we'd go on these different kind of shows, and that sort of thing would take place. And instead of um, you know, causing one to reflect, it just made them double down. And in my experience, seeing similar things to other people over the years,
Yeah,
it was pretty common. It's pretty common. Usually people do double down when they're put under pressure. And like you brought up ultimatum.
yeah.
The word ultimatum for me was like, I don't like the word triggering, but I
Okay.
guess you could say it was triggering over the
Yeah,
years, because anytime in my leadership role in the movement, if somebody gave me an ultimatum like, hey, you need to get rid of this guy or I'm gone,
yeah,
bye, there's the
yeah,
door. Because it was just, I was notorious for like, do not give me an ultimatum because you're going to get the opposite,
yeah,
or you're really not going to like how this is going to turn out. So
yeah.
it was always said, you can approach me in any way you like, as long as you're respectful. But if you give me an ultimatum, you're screwed.
Yeah. Well, and it's so strange that just like a talk show host or any of those things, if you see someone in jail, like obviously they're treated poorly, but if you were in their shoes, more than likely you're going to do the same exact thing. This is why I like talking about your earliest childhood memory to now. It's like if I was in the same situation, doing the same thing. Like it's we're just all people living out a different scenario. So to show empathy and to look for understanding, I feel like that will bring us closer, but that's not a lot of what I guess entertainment or television is. When you went to these shows, were you treated differently by staff? Did people have conversations with you? And then when you went live, it was different. What was that environment like?
Um, it really varied on a lot of different things, because I mean, I'd done tons and tons. I mean, probably hundreds of interviews, at least hundreds, over the years, and still now as
Yeah,
well, maybe thousands. I have no idea how many, but it really depends on the people. So some of them were, very nice and cordial both on and off the air. Others were, very hostile, like the case that I mentioned.
yeah,
And it really depended. It was really different. But it wasn't until some of the way later, like around 2016, and I can talk about that, or we can
yeah.
talk about other things, but it wasn't until then where I
Gotcha.
started having some changes and
Yeah.
turning things around.
Wonderful. So when you're doing a rally or you're doing a march or something like that, is there like a pregame speech that you give your guys? Is there like, hey, we're out here to do this? What's the situation like?
So ahead of the rallies, I always, either myself or one of the officers in the organization would always give some kind of talk. Tip once in a great while, somebody would forget, I would forget it, or somebody would forget it, but 99% of the time, beforehand, you would have a little talk. You get when everybody was together,
Yeah.
you would say, run down the rules of it. You're not to strike anyone first. That was a
Okay.
big thing over all the years I was involved, which 27 years total.
Okay.
um, there was no arrests in all
Wow.
those years of
Yeah.
anybody on. Um, Not that there wasn't any arrests in the organization.
Yeah.
I got to say this. I got to make it clear. There was lots of arrests for people doing things they shouldn't have been doing. But at rallies, we ran a very tight ship because we
Okay.
knew like if we struck the enemy first, we're the ones going to go to jail. So it was always, self defense.
Yeah.
You can. If somebody hits you, you can hit back. But if somebody's on the ground, like you can't stomp on them or anything like that because that crosses. We knew the laws very well as far as
Right.
what legal lines we had to walk and stuff like that. So that was and that is not an easy thing to do. I don't think there's anybody in this country that can probably say over a 27-year stretch and never had anybody um arrested for criminal things
Yeah.
over the years. Now I
That
was
that's
sued later on, but that's different. But I
yeah.
was uh never had anybody arrested for criminal activity at a rally.
Yeah. So as far as those rallies go in particular, are we just going for recruiting? Are we trying to just get our name in newspapers? What does that do for you as far as an organization?
As far as the organization went with rallies were both. It was to recruit and to get the word out of the organization in the press. So the organization had its own media team and it had a press release department.
Okay.
So somebody would say like whatever state we were going, if it was a state capital
Yeah.
or a big rally, would hit all the local send emails or messages to all the local news, saying that we were coming and that sort of thing. And that also, the reason for that was keep our name in the press, also translated to recruits. So maybe people that didn't know about the rally might see it on the news
Okay.
and reach out to us. And so was marketing, as far as that, it was marketing as far as that went.
So you said you did some pretty good numbers. You added a lot of people to the group. Was that like individuals that kind of are ostracized and they found what they were looking for? Was it groups of people that would come to you? What was that usually like for you?
All of the above, I mean,
Okay.
we wanted to know why people were joining. So, like on the applications, it would have, they changed over the years, and different aspects were added to
Yeah.
organization membership handbooks, rank structures, structures to keep everything tight. Some people would join. Why do people join these groups? For some, it's a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, a
Okay.
mission, an ideology. For some, it's just a sense of belonging. It really depends on the individual. So sometimes smaller groups would merge forces with us, to be part of something bigger because the group was national and international as well, but mostly national with some international chapters. And then so we would bring in other groups and that sort of thing as well. So people came from all aspects of life.
Yeah.
So you would get anybody from 18 to uh 90
Hmm.
joining up.
What was there ever any kind of debates that had you on your back foot, or you pretty much had your talking points that you felt pretty strong in when having conversations?
I always felt pretty strong in the talking points. I was highly committed. I was an ideologue. So I was highly committed to the cause. And it was sort of like, your life means nothing, the cause means everything. And
Interesting.
that's
Okay.
yeah, so that's a pretty common thing in radicalism and extremism is
Yeah.
where um, your sense of purpose is minimized or the individual doesn't really mean so much, but the cause means everything. The cause meant more than friendships and everything else. So I mean, over the years, there was situations that had come across my desk where it's like you have to make a choice here. You've got somebody that's harming the organization
Yeah.
and because of their behavior or whatever it might be. Um, you may have to kick a good friend of yours out or
Yeah.
demote them or knock them down in the ranks and stuff. And I had to do that a lot. And that's hard to do because a lot of people like to play favorites and
Yeah.
things like that. And I tried not to do that. So
Probably going to lose the biggest possible sponsorship there, but it kind of sounds like the U.S. military. Uh,
it was structured like the military. We had
yeah.
rank systems and yes, very, very much paramilitary.
Yeah, and just as far as you got to listen to the people above you, it's someone is attacking our homeland, and then at that point you got them. Like they're gonna do what you say, but yeah, that's psychologically. I forget what I was listening about, but when people used to go to war, I think World War Two, they would go out and they'd shoot left, they'd shoot high, like they didn't know what was like they didn't want to kill somebody, but if you can get them psychologically prepared for that, then I think it's a lot easier to give a massive group of people direction.
100%. 100%. That's a huge part of it. And you when you get somebody to that point, and you even if you look at groups like ISIS or Al Qaeda and you
Yeah,
wonder like how are these people like beheading others and how are they doing that? And your mind automatically goes, well, it must be a psychopath. Now it could be, but those are a very small percentage of society. Even
right.
they're in greater numbers in extremist groups, but there's still the minority there. Most of the people that are doing that are just radicalized in regular people that were radicalized into this belief system that they're doing it for God or they're doing it for the cause of this higher power.
Yeah,
And now they're capable of things that are totally inhuman and that's the danger of any kind of radicalism is you can get to this point where you just throw your life away and you can
yeah.
harm others and we've seen so many examples of that.
Well, and if we have understanding of it was their uncle, their grandma, their mom that just got bombed in front of them, maybe they're not going to be a huge fan of the US or whatever country or England taking over for 1,000 years or colonizing and things of that nature. And then just to label somebody as just like a random terrorist, like I can't believe they would do this. And then it's like, well, if your son, daughter, uncle, relative was shot, do you think you'd be upset? It's like, I'm not saying it's okay, but that's just where we are with that situation. As far as your, not de-radicalization, but your thought process and change of thoughts, what were the steps that kind of got you to that area? There she is.
There she is. She's super cute.
No, thank you.
All right. Let me think. You asked me the question again.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
got
yeah.
sidetracked.
Sorry. As far as the steps that it took you to stop doubling down, to start thinking about possibly changing your ideas might be wrong. What were those small increments? Not necessarily that big one, but how did we start headed down that path?
Well, my journey to de-radicalization was kind of backwards. Like, in the work that I do now,
Yep.
helping others de-radicalize, you want them to disengage from these groups first, and then you work on the de-radicalization part. But disengagement is super important because
Yeah.
if you're immersed in the group, you're
Right.
it's just an echo chamber. It's just constantly going. But my journey was backwards. So I'm de-radicalizing while I'm still engaged. Now, had somebody told me that, those would have been fighting words. I'd be like, you don't know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. You're crazy. But when I look back and piece this stuff together, that's exactly what was going on. Because in the last few years, like probably should have left the organization in like 2016
Okay.
after I really was starting to have a shift in my mindset after meeting different individuals and seeing things in a different way. But I didn't. I'm trying to change the group and trying to fix things.
Okay.
A lot of us men want to fix everything, and that's what I was trying to do. And I explain that now as trying to put lipstick on a pig. You
Yeah.
can put lipstick on a pig, still ain't gonna be pretty. It's still a pig under that lipstick. So that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to dress things up in and make it look pretty, and there's no fixing it. So I'm saying this is not a Nazi party. This isn't the Nazi part. Or stop telling the press. I'm telling the press, don't call us a Nazi group. Don't call us a hate group. We're a white civil rights organization.
Yeah.
Now I'm talking about the Nazi party here. It's not a white civil rights organization, but in my mind, that's how I was making sense of it. And I was trying to convince the world and myself and everybody else that this is what it was. And looking back on it, I just go, wow, that's so insane. That's so stupid. That's so, but that's how I was making sense of it at the time. And once I finally realized this is not something you can fix. This just is what it is.
Yeah.
And this is a futile battle. You can't fix this. So that's when I finally broke away from it and not just broke away, but I knew that I was going to speak out against it. And I wanted to truly repair some of the damage that I had done by the hatred and divisiveness that I put out into the world for so long.
So how do you get these thoughts that you're having in your head, and how do you communicate that with whoever you're bouncing these ideas off, or is it, hey, at this point, it's just all going to switch? What's the thought process like in making that happen?
A lot of it was internalized, because you can't, I mean, when you're saying like since I was the commander of the organization, since I was running it, it wasn't a democracy.
Okay.
So any rules that I put into effect, were rules.
That power's
But
got to
to
be
before,
wild.
right, right, for sure, for sure. So there was different policy things that were being put into place, and sometimes people wouldn't agree with it, and well, there's the door then.
Okay.
you know Now when I was making some of these shifts, sometimes I would talk with like some of the top officers, like those people would have more weight in like the decision making process and things
Yeah.
like that, but ultimately the decision was mine. So um when it boiled down to it, if people, there was like when I was changing the symbolism and the uniforms and the different way the organization looked to the outside world, there was a lot of the people like didn't question things, or they would, you'd hear grumblings about it,
Yeah.
because this was a system where people would report on other people if there was problems and things, because we had to do that for, to keep things legal. Like if somebody was coming in suggesting illegal activities or whatever, get rid of those people, get them out. And so I would hear some grumblings, and some of the people that have been with me for 20 years
Yeah.
or many years, they might say, I disagree with you on this. This is a bad move, and I think you're going to regret it, or things like that nature. But typically, there wasn't a whole lot of pushback because the way it was structured, there just wasn't room for that. If someone they could voice their discontent,
Okay.
but not publicly, because if you did it publicly, it would look bad on the group.
You mentioned as far as like people wanting to do things illegally, do you feel like since your organization got so big that there was ever any like informants or FBI or anything in there trying to, okay, like that popped in my head. I was like, interesting. I feel like, well, bring me up to speed on that. What was that like?
Oh boy. Well, I hadn't mentioned this yet, but in my book, American Nazi, it just come out this year. It's called American Nazi From Hate to Humanity. And I go into a few of the um, incidents in
Okay.
there where we actually uncovered undercover informants and things
Really?
like that. But I mean, I covered, I don't even know how many, at least five, I
Okay.
think, in there, but there was way more than that. And the bigger your organization gets, the more infiltrated it's going to be over the years. I
Yeah.
saw it with other groups that Aryan Nations, for example, was probably the most infiltrated group I'd ever seen in all the years, because they weren't
Really?
having having this the security level
Yeah.
that we were doing was next level, because early on when we had gotten infiltrated, it resulted in a violent attack
Okay.
on us, and people got hurt and things like that. So after that, I start doing counterintelligence operations, and I'm
So
infiltrating.
are you going to the library here? Like, how are you figuring this? How are you learning this?
Some of it was cause and effect. Like I
Okay.
was learning through our mistakes. So we
Okay.
were infiltrated. So it's like, all right, this isn't going to happen again. We tracked down the infiltrator. The first time we were infiltrated, it was somebody out of Chicago. So we figured out who it was, where they were coming from, and then we start infiltrating the Antifa groups because they were infiltrating us, and
Okay.
you've got government infiltrators as
Yeah.
well that had come in. And back in the 90s, the government infiltrators were typically very easy to spot early on, because they would come and it would be like a one-off type of thing. They'd
Okay.
just show up or try to join, and it was a lot of these aren't in the book, but I discussed some of the craziest ones, or
Yeah.
some of the wilder ones in there. But like they would come in, and even when I was at Aryan Nations the one time at the compound at the church, there was somebody that had come up there and just immediately started spewing stuff about like, hey, we should go make some, I don't even want to say the word,
Yeah.
things that go boom, you
Oh,
know? And I
great.
was like, this person's an informant. Either one of two things. If
Yeah.
somebody's coming like that, they're either an informant or they're an idiot. And the idiot's going to get you locked up because they're going to say that, and then you hear it, and then now you're an accomplice.
Yeah.
Or if they're working for an agency, They
Yeah.
could be recording you, and now you're complicit as well if you're not discouraging that. So those are just some of the type of things that happen, but some of them they got better at it over the years. Like the
Yeah.
government's uh, tactics got much better. So early on, we thought, well, we can find the informants within 3 months. And we're like, no, we need to have a longer probationary period, 6 months. We'll
Okay.
find them in 6 months. No informant ever goes longer than a year. That was my thinking back by the late 90s, because the government wasn't going to keep paying somebody.
Gotcha.
This was our thought process, but that became wrong as well, because later years there was informants that we uncovered that had been in for years, and
Woo.
that just blew everything we thought we knew out of the water. So
Yeah.
every time we thought we had one up, that there was people that we were finding other ones.
Oh, that's so wild. I feel just the amount of stress had to be overwhelming, or somehow you were just able to sit in a sauna and just let it all let it all go. How did you handle the stress?
The stress was, oh, like the way I explain this when people ask, it's like being at war every single day. Like you
Yeah.
wake up, you're at war, because you don't know. Over the years, I had raids on the house,
Yeah.
on our family home. Like when my kids were little. Well, the first raid was a no-knock warrant. The doors were smashed in. They came in. This story's in my book as well,
Hmm.
but they came in masked up,
Yeah.
full body armor, head to toe, flashlights on the end of assault rifles, and uh, I'm kicking the doors in, smashing
Yeah.
the doors in, woods from the doors shattered everywhere, and you just hear this boom, and then guns in your face at 4 in the morning, and the kids screaming and crying, and being hauled out to squad cars and things like that, and then finding, oh, there's nothing here that's illegal, you're free to go. And that happened once in Minnesota, and once the second time the no knock raid was in Minnesota, and then here I was raided again in Detroit. But it wasn't a no knock warrant, but they showed up, and my girl answered the door.
Yeah.
She just opened it just that much, boom, and it knocked her down, and came in similar, but it wasn't as aggressive as the first raid.
So obviously not a whole big fan of Nazism, but I feel like the no knock warrant, them knowing, I feel like they had to be with the understanding they were going to get something there, or they were just letting you know that they're close. Like what do you think their purpose was if they knew nothing was there?
Well, the first time was confusing because a judge has to sign off on this. So
Yeah.
they had gotten the no-knock warrant and gotten a judge to approve it. And there didn't seem to be like really any. It was like search for weapons, search for, any illegal activities, stuff like that. And they didn't find anything illegal, and
Yeah.
nothing ever came of it. Now, the second raid was a little bit more. I had more details for the second raid because
Okay.
they drop off paperwork, and in the second raid, in the paperwork, they talked about a trusted, longtime confidential informant that had sparked this raid, and that specific confidential informant, because they didn't name him in the papers,
Yeah.
but they gave enough information. And the way I ran, like I was explaining, I ran things like sort of like a military operation
Yeah.
in the web. The person that was doing that was the person they said that helped build the business site for NSM Records, which was my business company. Well,
Yeah.
only one person worked on that site. I had different webmasters and different people on the web team, a small number. There was never more than five. Usually it was three.
Mhm.
And but only one person contributed to actually building the record site,
Yeah.
and that person was the informant. So that story is covered, and of course I don't name them.
Right.
I don't name people, but yeah, that was really
So
wild.
th not to put this in like a pot, we'll see where it goes. You're not doing anything illegal. Obviously, a hate group, obviously saying Nazism is good, so on and so forth. Freedom of speech. You're not doing anything illegal. You're not going to, like you said, not getting anybody arrested for doing anything wrong, in that direction, like you mentioned on rallies and stuff. Um, Why do you think you were being targeted by the government?
Now, there was people in the organization that were arrested for criminal activity. I just want to
Okay.
make that clear. There was
Okay.
some things that were really egregious. It just didn't happen it didn't happen on behalf of the organization. Otherwise, we would have been taken down for it. But they would do things on their
Oh,
own. Like you can't control everybody, babysit everybody 24 hours a day. So there was
right.
people that had gotten into other trouble, but it wasn't necessarily on behalf of the organization. But the government, I think, sees these organizations as a threat in different ways, because in some cases, some of the people that are involved in it have been capable of doing different things. There
Okay.
has been um, typically, not always, but and I'm not sure of the stats on this, but I mean, there's people that get radicalized by the ideology that go out and do horrific things, mass shootings, bombings, you name it,
Yeah.
that have done a lot of horrible things. And that like the organized groups, I was a part of an above ground group.
Yeah.
So this had a board of directors. It was a state nonprofit, believe it or not a federal one, because that's against discrimination. You can't be a federal
Yeah.
nonprofit, but state nonprofit you
With the
can
state,
be.
that's fine. That's fine.
Yeah, it's weird, right? Like, but I still pay taxes. You still have to pay taxes on,
Yeah.
but it was registered as a state nonprofit, and then the business was an LLC. But um, I think they view it as they didn't have us listed as like domestic terrorists, but it was like a domestic group of interest or something like that
Okay.
was the term they used, the feds used.
Do,
Yeah.
do you think that organizations such as yourself, or groups that were closely linked, cause more radical actions, or would it be more just the ideology that if an action does happen, they'd like to blame the group? That's kind of confusing question. I feel like the government will infiltrate groups, and there'll be 13 informants, and there'll be two guys that are like, oh, gung ho, and they just kind of get brought along, and then they're patsies. Do you feel like that happens more, or do you think the bad actors are really out there doing a lot of bad things?
It's both. I mean,
Okay.
there's been cases like that where, I mean, there was cases where we were the group I was involved in was pretty keen to it, like pretty much was looking out for that kind of thing. So if somebody came in, and sometimes you'd have young people that would join and they want to impress the older guys, so they would
Yeah.
say, hey, maybe we should go do these things. So my rule was one warning. You tell the person, they said, if somebody says we should go do these terrible things, you've got one chance, one
Okay.
warning. We don't do that. That's not what we're about. And if I hear you talking like that again, or if it's reported, by somebody in the chain of command that you're doing that sort of thing, you're out,
Okay.
because only undercovers or idiots speak like that. And so in my experience, a lot of times the people that have went out and done the crazy stuff are involved in some of the even more radical organizations that are
Okay.
what you call your underground organizations, or more often than not, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but more often than not, it's like the lone wolf radicalized people that go and do the stuff. So in the way the structure that I had that was set up, if someone came to us and say, hey, do I have permission to go do this?
Yeah.
No, you don't. And if you want to do that, you have to quit or we throw you out, one or the other. Um, so we don't have anything to do with anything illegal. You
Yeah.
cannot talk that way to us. And so if you have somebody out there that's getting radicalized like today, like online, they
Yeah.
don't have that. Like I always explain myself, or I felt like I was a pressure valve in some ways. And this is another thing that caused my delay in leaving, because I felt like, what if I leave and that pressure valve is gone?
Yeah.
Now what? And then I started, I got to that point, and I remember speaking with a friend of mine, um, Dia Khan, she's a Muslim lady, and I remember saying, I said, "What if I leave and there's not that pressure valve anymore?" And she's like, "I never even thought of that, Jeff. You have to stop thinking about. You need to think about what how this is affecting your life,
Yeah.
and how it's not good for you. You can't always control what everybody else thinks." And my dad kind of said the same thing, and I felt like, you know what, I can't be responsible for all of this. And for me, some of the last straws were happening towards the end as well, like where I think the very, very last straw, and somebody had asked this recently, like, what was the very last straw? Because there was a million straws
Right.
um, to reasons to disengage. And finally, at the end, I think the very last thing was something kind of minor compared to, I guess everything else. And we had all these rules and regulations, and a lot were in writing, but there was some things you just thought like, well, it's common sense. It shouldn't have to be in writing. And one of those common sense things was like social media policies. So I actually had to put this in towards the end of my time in there, like, hey, don't post violent stuff on social media.
Yeah.
And one guy was posting like mosques on fire or some burning of
Right.
mosques or whatever. And I was like, dude, that is not acceptable. You can't post that. And he says, well, I didn't make the post. I just reposted it. Somebody else posted it. And I got so angry, like usually I was
Yeah.
having the chain of command do this, but this was somebody that had been with the group for a while, should have known better. And that was their response. And I was handling it directly. And I just wanted to like choke this person out.
Yeah.
And then soon after that, another person posted, like, I don't know, it was from some genocide in Africa, like a wagon full of dead body parts, and thought
Yeah.
it was funny or something. And finally I was like, you know what? And this was another long time person that had been in the group. And I said, you can't do this.
Yeah.
I'm not like this, and this is not okay. This is, I mean, this kind of thing. No, I'm done. This is it. That was one of there was many straws, but that was the final straw for me. I was like, that was just the last piece of straw in that bale, that giant bale of hay. And it was like
Yeah.
that was the final one. It was like, nope, now's the time. This is it.
Mhm.
You know,
What when you started your exit or it became public, did people start reaching out to you as far as like, hey, how did you do it? Or like was it positive response? What was going on there?
leaving was the hardest thing I ever did in my life.
Yeah.
It was when I first left, I retired because I knew I was going to speak out against it. But I know once you start speaking out, then the threats and all that kind of stuff comes in because in some of these groups, it varies, So some of the more violent ones, it's harder to leave. The
Yeah.
group I was in, you could leave, but if you speak out against it, then you're considered like a traitor in the eyes of those groups, even though I didn't dox anybody or do anything to hurt anybody, um, or anything of that nature, but they still view it as because you're speaking out against the movement, now
Yeah.
you're a traitor. So I knew that was coming. So, and I wasn't ready to speak out immediately. For some people, it takes a really long time, but I'd thrived in a high stress environment for most of my life, almost my entire life. So I tend to process things a little faster. And when I felt like I was ready to speak out, which would have been August of, I left in early March of 19. I started speaking out in August or September of 2019.
Okay.
So, and at that point, when I retired, I'm being bombarded with messages like, please come back. We don't like the new leader.
Yeah.
You're needed here. Whatever's going on with you, we're here for you. People thought I burned out, or, they had their own ideas of what happened. Like maybe he burned out. Maybe the system had something on him.
Yeah.
The system would have given me an ultimatum. I would have doubled down. So that wasn't that. But, people make up things in their head what the reason is. So they all are, and I was being sued at the time. So people were like, oh, some people thought I left because of the lawsuit.
Okay.
And that was a narrative. So it was like, actually, no, the lawsuit was one of the things that almost made me stay longer because the movement was paying for the
Right.
attorney. So leaving means I'm still fighting the lawsuit. And now I don't have a way to pay for it because my job and everything else was wrapped up in the movement. So
Okay.
when I left, I also had to leave my career behind and everything like that. So my business and everything that I'd worked for, that's what I had. So not only did I leave like this position of perceived power, whatever, and all my friends and everybody that I knew for my whole life, I also left a business behind and walked out into a world with nothing on my resume but running a white power record label and being the leader of the Nazi party.
That's
So
a
that
that's a tough
was
LinkedIn post right there. That's not gonna that's not gonna do
right.
you well. That's not going to get you a lot of clicks or a lot of interest.
It was tough. So that first period, I got people reaching out trying to pull me back. And then when I start speaking out and I put out a website and a press release and all that, now I'm a traitor and I'm the worst, POS
Yeah.
in the world. And all these terrible things, what so and at that point I'm getting it from all sides. So I'm speaking out, and there's people on the far left that are saying he's still a Nazi, you know.
Really?
So I'm a Nazi from, you know, that didn't totally surprise me because I fought these people in the streets for
Right.
decades, so of course they're going to say that. And a lot of them say anybody that's even a conservative is a Nazi nowadays, so
Yeah.
that's really toxic. But so I expected that to a degree, I think, but I think it was worse than I had anticipated. Usually I prepare for like worst case
You're
scenarios
right.
because it helps me get by on things, like
Right.
that. I understand what I'm up against. This could be the worst case scenario, and I don't panic or anything like that.
Yeah.
But there was some things that were much worse than I had anticipated. And then, of course, being called a traitor and all that for speaking out against hate and racism. And for me, I think the hardest thing was some of the public um, disparagement.
Yeah.
Like there was an article, a lot of the news media was coming out with stories, and they're like running these crazy stories that were saying things that weren't even close to remotely true, and
Yeah.
then they wouldn't quote me in them or anything, or if they did, it was just something that didn't really explain anything. And then when I started speaking out, there was like a headline was like leader of the Nazi move, or neo-Nazi leader leaves the movement. Do you believe him or something? Things like that. It's like, oh my gosh, like now I can kind of look back on it and just go, I get it and I understand. But at the time, it felt like the whole entire world was piling down at me on at once,
Yeah.
and I'm getting hit from all sides. So like I had a friend of mine that had been in about 20 years with me, and he calls me up, and most of the people I'm not talking to, I'm just not taking all these calls
Right.
or answering the emails because it's just too much emotionally and everything else. And he says, I'm worried about you. What are you gonna do with your life now? Like, what are you gonna, and just like you said about the LinkedIn profile, and these are things that I was thinking in my head, but I
Yeah.
didn't verbalize them to anybody, because I did a lot of this self work, and I didn't want to share those vulnerabilities, I guess. But he calls me up and he's like, what are you going to put on your job application? Leader of the Nazi Party for 25 years? White Power record label executive? Like, what are you going to do? Like, do you need help? Like, can I send you some money for food? And,
Yeah.
are you paying your bills and everything? And for the longest time, I was living off my life savings. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I had nothing. I had nothing.
You
And
got strong leader, starter, good at speeches. We could swing this.
right. I mean, I have these skill sets, but we're all put into the wrong direction. You know what I'm saying? So like it doesn't look good. So
So
those are the things that
what's our first job? What's our first opportunity? What's the light that keeps us going?
well what pushed me to keep doing this is because I was I had a mission before, and my mission was the movement.
Right.
um I mean, originally it was music, but then it shifted to music, or shifted to the movement after the music career uh, when I gave up on it
Yeah.
because of being doxxed. So now I was like, my new mission is going to be peace building. I
Okay.
didn't really know what that looked like because I haven't lived in the civilian world until the last few years because
Yeah.
I'd been at war all those years for 27 years. So now I'm an adult, and um, stepping away from the war zone into civilian life. What is that? So I'm having to learn how to function in regular society, and how that looks. And uh, I get an email from an organization called the Simon Wiesenthal Center. And this is international Jewish human rights organization. They cover human rights for all people. But Simon Wiesenthal, the founder of it, was a Holocaust survivor,
Okay.
and what they were known for, what I knew about them, excuse me, was that they had brought like old Nazi war criminals to justice and things like that. I didn't know much else about the organization. I get an email from them, from a man named Rick Eaton, who was their chief researcher for, I think he's been there about 37 years or something now.
Yeah.
And he says, I saw your website. This is like 2 days of the website launching. I saw your website and I wanted to know if you would like to meet with us. And I
Okay.
thought, oh, the Wiesenthal Center, maybe they're going to come and have the Mossad grab me, try to
Oh
send me to
no.
Israel to stand trial or something. Like that was in the back of my head, but I didn't think it was that, but that was the worst
Yeah.
case scenario. So I agreed to meet with him, and he was on a plane within a couple of days.
Wow.
And I told my girl, because he was like, "This is big news. If this is legit, this no one of my standing had ever left the movement in the United States before. So there's other formers that have left and speak out, which is awesome. But nobody, no national leader had ever walked away before. So
Yeah.
that's why they were so keen to come out right away. And so I told my girl, I said, I'm going to go meet with this guy, Rick. Here's the email. This is the person I'm meeting with. If I don't come home,
Yeah.
it means I'm on an involuntary extradition to Israel. And I work with the Jewish community
Right.
today, so I tell that story, and it gets a lot of laughs usually. A lot of laughs or a lot of stares, but
Yeah.
usually laughs. But so it was kind of interesting. And then I learned that they're involved in a lot of educational initiatives and things like that. So I was volunteering my time with them and in the beginning and speaking out and doing a lot of wonderful things, and that eventually transformed into kind of the work I'm doing now. Now I'm a public speaker. I do collaborate with Wiesenthal. I also am a speaker at Conscious Campus, GDA speakers, and a number of other places. So I go today. I speak in like schools across the country. I've spoke at the Nobel Peace Center, believe it or not, in Oslo, Norway. Just got back from a book tour in Australia, spoke all over the country there,
Wow.
spoke at Combat Anti-Semitism's Australian National Mayors Conference,
Yeah.
a lot of things of that nature. It was on Joe Rogan a few weeks ago
Yeah.
as well with my
I saw
brother
that.
Daryl.
I
Yeah,
might have messaged you within the first like 10 seconds of watching the episode.
Joe was great. That was
Yeah.
great.
So as far as your experience on dealing with people, now I have a perception on like people's empathy of that, not, but the group that you started working with, Holocaust survivors and things of that nature, it seems like they had been through hard things. They understand the depth of the situation and how to combat it. Do you think that's what people are missing that aren't able to either conversate or understand? Or why do you think people have such a hard time either with your transition or just kind of where your position is now?
Like with the Wiesenthal Center, they were the organization that worked with the first former that ever had left in the United States, which is a man by the name of T.J. Lydon. It was a skinhead that had left, and
Okay.
they had utilized TJ had worked with them as well, and a number of other formers as well, like Tim Zoll and T.M. Garrett and a lot of others over the years have worked with Wiesenthal. So they understand, they see it, they see the value in some of us that have left and broken away from that life,
Yeah.
being able to turn our lives around. And it's a good uplifting story for people. And I didn't know what that all looked like. And the first time I was going to a synagogue was in Skokie, Illinois.
All right,
And
that's about 30 minutes from me.
all right, so you know exactly. I'm out there quite a bit, actually. I've got a lot of friends in Skokie now, and
Or let me
really
know next
tight
time
with the
you're out.
community. Yeah, for sure, for sure. I have to remember this. That's awesome, man. So Skokie's great. It's a great
Yeah.
community, great people, and out there quite not lately I haven't been, but usually out there quite a bit. And
Okay.
um spoke at a synagogue there with TM, and then I brought along two other formers that had never really interacted with the Jewish community, and certainly none of us except for TM had ever been to a synagogue.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, wow, um, the people will probably want to stone us to death. You
Right.
know, I'm thinking they're going to hate us. There's Holocaust survivors and their family members there, and that they would not feel very good about this. So this was very, I was a little nervous going into it, but we get there and the rabbi's talking about, he's introducing us and he's saying what these men did was heroic and courageous. And I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling even worse about who I was now. Like he's being so kind.
Yeah.
And then we talked, and after the speech had gotten more hugs than I had received probably anywhere ever in my entire life. And I thought, wow, this is woof, it just makes the hair stand up on the back of your neck. It was so much compassion and empathy and from the people. It was like, why did I why were these people the enemy?
Hmm.
Like why did I and these were the people that I spewed so much venom. Like people would say over the years, like that I wasn't really a racist, but I
Yeah.
was a raging anti-Semite, and that
Yeah.
that would have been accurate, like man. And then to have that kind of compassion and empathy from the people that you vilified the most, that it's almost there's almost no words to explain that, but it's like it's hard to explain, but it was so meaningful, and it's something I'll never ever forget, and it pushes me to do this work even more because it's like
Yeah.
I wasn't just wrong, I was like really really wrong, like opposite day wrong, really wrong.
So
So
when you're having a conversation, because I have disagreements with family members and other people, and I'm always trying to not necessarily bring them to understand where I'm at, but I want to show that, hey, if in your example, if someone of the Jewish faith can have someone that's a former like yourself and even give them a hug and understanding and so on and so forth, like why can't you see like you might be missing something here? Like why is this such a hard reach? Why are you being so aggressive? Where's the empathy? How do you not necessarily pull them over to your side, but how do you have conversations with people that are just so hard to, I guess maybe stuck in their ways or their thoughts? How does that conversation go?
well, and for me, and I just want to say this as a preamble, like beyond just getting hugs and stuff, like a lot of my friends, my closest friends today are Jewish, and when I'm there in Chicago, I typically stay with the regional director of the Wiesenthal Center at her
Okay.
home. And so there's people that have come over and they'll be like, I'm answering the door or whatever, and this is an Orthodox home, with the
Yeah.
two sinks and all these kind of things. So I learned how all that works, and so like a lot of my friends are in the Jewish community today, and
Yeah.
and there's still people that are, I'm sure, are baffled by it. There's people we know that are baffled by it. Are you guys really friends? Like yes, a lot of them, and a lot of Holocaust survivors and their family members and stuff, and we're good friends. So if that can happen,
Right.
and a radical change like this can happen, anybody's capable of change. So this is a radical example, but anybody's capable of it. But the process, like what you're asking about,
Yeah.
is something that I call a relational dialogue.
Okay.
And relational dialogue is also the process that we use in extremist disengagement
Hmm.
and trying to help people reframe their way of thinking. So it's the process that I learned. It's based on the processes that I learned from having interactions with Diakon and Daryl Davis, and the way they approach people and the way they talk with people. So it has to do with authenticity, curiosity, um, deep listening, respect, and then showing people a different perspective. You don't tell somebody that they're wrong, you show them how they're wrong. So
Okay.
typically in an argument or in a disagreement, if you're telling somebody they're wrong, it's automatic conflict. You're going
Hmm.
to push back, push back, push back. Nobody wants to admit they're wrong. But if you can plant seeds, it's not a snap of a finger solution, but it
Right.
takes time a lot of times. But if you can plant seeds, which is how it worked with me as well, I had to reflect on those seeds. I had to think about it, and they challenged my belief system. And especially when you're that deeply embedded, that's a lot to break that down. I mean, I had to reflect on this and go, you know what? It'd be easier to stay because it's comfortable. I know this life. I
Yeah.
get it. But then saying, or walk out into the great unknown, which is exactly what I did. But I felt like I had to because my conscience demanded it. I couldn't live, it would be living a lie to
Mhm.
continue in the movement. And I couldn't do that because my conscience wouldn't allow it. So anybody's capable of it, but the process is relational dialogue. And that's probably a whole nother show because we do
Yeah.
workshops. I do workshops on it and things. And it's a process, but it's a great process and it's something
Yeah.
anybody can learn.
Well, I think time and place is super important, and generally today's society doesn't give us the time or the place. So we have Thanksgiving coming up, and that's definitely neither the time nor the place, but maybe to plant some seeds. Um,
Well, and with Thanksgiving, I mean, that's a perfect example. And this is one I use often. Every one of us knows somebody in our families or in our social circles that will not invite somebody to the Thanksgiving table from their family
yeah,
because they voted a certain way. You know, like they voted for the president or they voted for the challenger, you know, and you're not welcome at the table because you voted this way. Like that's something we didn't have that kind of divide in this country 20 years ago, but
yeah,
we do now, and it is bad. So it's like you got to be able to engage in this relational dialogue. You got to be able to have, and even if you know you in our family, it was basically we just decided not to talk politics, and that's how we kind of held the family together. So even if you have to do it that way and not talk about it, that's fine. Or use relational dialogue and
yeah.
have those gentle conversations. It's one or the other, but you know, don't ostracize people because if you do that and you close somebody off and lock them out, so to speak,
Yeah.
they're going to be driven into that echo chamber. They're going to be more solidified in it, and it's just going to create a greater divide.
Absolutely. Before we wrap things up with the last two questions, you have a lot of things going on. So, if they were looking into more of the either the classes you put on or your book, label off what we got going on.
So the book is American Nazi From Hate to Humanity. It was released by Wilkinson Publishing out of Australia, but you can get it directly through my website or bookstores everywhere, Amazon, whatever. It's available pretty much everywhere. So that's out. I'm doing speaking across the country in different places, different around the world, different doing workshops on relational dialogue. That's
Okay.
new. Just started that this summer, and a friend of mine over at Cal State Fullerton, Dr. Ding Jo Curry, she helped me with the workshop part, especially because it's like I talk about relational dialogue, but I don't know anything. Didn't know about how building workshops. So she's phenomenal, and she runs Leadership Institute for Tomorrow, and she helped me get that workshop put together, and we delivered that at Cal State and at Leadership Institute as well this summer. So that's available if people want to learn how to do it. Otherwise, I speak at schools and just do general talks about the subjects and my story and the power of change and what we can do to bring things together and a few collaborative different talks with different people and things. I did one with the a senator there, Senator Laura Fine. I did a talk with her in Chicago
Very
a
cool.
while back. Who else? Working on a few collaborations. There's a couple that are coming out. They're still in the works, so I
Yeah.
can't say just yet, but we got a lot of things going.
Awesome. So we'll finish with the last two questions. What's your definition of health? Not necessarily the dictionary definition, but what is health to you?
Well, that's a really broad question. Health. So, well, it could be mental or physical, right? I think
Yep.
for me, it's both. It's mental and physical. I like to maintain good physical health and you know, do a lot of cardio and things like that and keep in good physical health. But mental health is also important because
Mhm.
if you lose the mental health, then you know your physical health can go downhill too. And allowing yourself to be overly stressed or in high stress environments can cause damage to your health too. That's a fact. So, and being angry and hating people is bad for your health as well. So that's something that people really need to think about. If you're angry every day, you ever
Yeah.
notice there's people that I noticed this too, and I had a hard time around people that are always negative
Yeah.
about everything. Like you could be doing something completely fun and they just be like, grumbling about it. And those people bring you down. Like if somebody's always negative, it will bring you down. And I started recognizing that in different aspects of life. And it's not just a thing in the movement. This is just people in general.
Right.
So it's very important to keep good mental health.
Absolutely. And then what's something from your life that people listening to the podcast would be able to take away as a positive?
Ooh, there's so many things. There's so many things. But I guess in summary, the best way to sum that up is if someone can go from a radical position like I was in, like running the Nazi party for 25 years and change their life around and now work with the Jewish community and work in peace building and spread that message all over the globe and to go from that to speaking at the Nobel Peace Center, which when I was at Nobel, I just blurted out to the director was giving me a personal tour of the building. And I said, I can't believe it. I'm getting a personal tour from the director. I didn't even think I'd even be allowed in this place, and
Yeah.
it just, I said it out loud and people were laughing. But um, that goes to show though, if somebody like me can change, that anybody can do it. So if there's somebody out there that's struggling, whether it's with alcohol, drugs, whether it's they've had lengthy prison sentences and now they're out and trying to put their life back together and they think, well, nobody's going to hire me. I've got this terrible prison sentence behind me, or I've been, in any whatever your challenge might be. It might be something even it's big to you, but it might look minor to
Right.
outside people. Right. Whatever that might be, my story is a story of inspiration and radical change and recovery and going from rock bottom, like bottom of the Mariana Trench, rock bottom when I left the movement and was trying to start my life over. That's where when people talk about rock bottom, I was at the bottom of the Mariana Trench bottom. That's how far, like, everything felt like despair and hopelessness and the whole world was coming crashing down on you at once and you had no support system. That's what I felt like, and I was able to overcome that and still working towards becoming a better person every single day. So if somebody like me can do it, anybody can do it. And that's the message that I want to perpetuate and put out into the world, because a lot of people feel hopeless and they feel like they have no, like the people that commit suicide and do these terrible things, like they just feel like all life is lost and it's over, and they just give up. And it's like, it's never, unless you're like in a life sentence in prison or something, and there's really no light at the end of the tunnel. The rest of
Yeah.
us all have lights at the end of the tunnel. So there's never any excuse for that. So think about that. And there's people that have went through even greater challenges than I have. So
Mm.
think about those folks and uplift, and you can do it. You can save your life and improve your life.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Been an honor. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.